Well, Legends Tomorrow finally starts to embrace its ridiculousness in one of its most creative and best episodes yet. Hey guys, it's Kevin Marr, the mid-season premiere of Legends Tomorrow, Season 2, Episode 9, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and guys, what an episode this was, because, as you guys know, yes, I don't think Legends Tomorrow is a perfect show in any sense of the word. I've never really found it to be a perfect show, but this season has really been, I think, doing everything that last season got wrong. It hasn't taken itself too seriously, it hasn't been anything too crazy, and it's been relatively quite simple. And overall, I've, really enjoyed where they've gone with the characters. However, this episode, on the other hand, this is a whole different show altogether because, wow, I mean, these are the kind of episodes Legends Tomorrow need to do. If they keep doing episodes like this, I mean, I love this show, really. If they kept doing episodes like this one, I really would love this show, because this show is ridiculous. It makes no sense sometimes. It's completely outlandish. I mean, hell, it's hard to understand what's going on most of the time. However, episodes like this is exactly what they need to do, because it is ridiculous, but it knows it's ridiculous. It's self-aware. It's one of the most confident episodes they've done, and by far one of the most creative. I mean, I'm really interested in seeing them doing something like this again with another episode. These are the kind of missions that they need to be doing. But let's just get in this episode, because I really did love this episode overall. By far one of the best episodes the show has done, without a doubt. But we start off, and I like the way this episode starts off, because we see the Wave Rider about to collide with the underwater atomic bomb in New York, 1942. Basically what we saw in the season premiere, and Rip hurries through the ship, double-checking the ship's repair procedure with Gideon. He locates a spear hidden within the floorboards before shutting down Gideon's systems and preparing to grab a ball of energy in the ship's time drive. So immediately we know, like, what's happened to Rip and how he's kind of gotten to where he is, and that spear is very important for the rest of this episode. Now, we'll get into why, but in the present day, Stein wanders through the Wave Rider in the middle of the night, and he finds Mick talking to another hallucination of Len. Now, you guys know, mid-season finale, I was not on board with the storyline. I thought, oh no, now they're trying to make Mick evil again. I really was not on board with it at all. I thought that it was completely the wrong direction. But I like the way they handled it here, that this was less of, Len getting into Mick's head and more of the guilt that Mick really feels, because he wants to do whatever he can to get rid of this. He really is not happy he's seeing these hallucinations, and Mick convinces Stein to help fix his brain, but threatens that he needs to keep it a secret from the rest of the group. And even this, as wacky as, this is the most serious thing in the episode, but even this gets a bit wacky, because as we know, Stein's not really a doctor. He's just a physician. He's not really, he doesn't really have any sort of medical license. He can't really do that kind of procedure. He's a therapist, and, he's a scientist and everything, but he's not, a physicist, but he's not a physician. He's not a doctor, and I thought that was definitely interesting the way that the show got into that, but it really does go with, like I said, the ridiculous tone this episode really has. So later at night, Nate's reading a book and listening to music in the library. Nate continues to be one of the best things about the show, and Ray and Amaya are complaining to Nate about his music and how it's too loud, and Nate was listening to, hardcore, 90s Beastie Boys music, and Nate reveals that he's trying to figure out what the Legion of Doom, his name for Dark, Malcolm, and Thawne want with the two amulets. And I thought that was kind of interesting. He named them the Legion of Doom, and I also thought it was funny that he named them just from watching a Hanna-Barbera cartoon. Now, some people thought this was Super Friends, but I don't know if the show would go that meta. I think that it's supposed to be just a show that he saw that had the Legion of Doom in the title, but he reveals that he carbon dated the amulet that Sarah briefly took from Dark with its origin around 30 AD, but he can't find records of either amulet. So Amaya discovers that the two amulets are actually parts of one amulet, which Nate recognizes as the Loneliness Medallion. So Nate wakes up the rest of the team to tell them about the Loneliness Medallion, and according to him, the blood of Christ fell onto Loneliness Medallion and spear, granting it magical powers, and the amulet calls its wearer directly to the spear. And the spear is actually the ability to rewrite reality entirely. So this is basically the thing that is going to rewrite history. And Nate reveals that while time aberrations can't be fixed, these changes to reality from the Sphere of Destiny are in fact permanent. And once they happen, you can't change them back. So immediately we do have this threat here that was very interesting. That definitely did get me into the episode. But what works even better are the dynamics in the show. The character pairings are some of the best ones we've had. I mean, Malcolm and Dark working together is not really something I ever really thought of, but these two work so well, almost to the point where they're like a couple. I mean, they just work so well together. They're following the aimless direction through 1967 LA, and Malcolm admits that the amulet is unspecific in the location of the spear. They approach two bikers who threaten to rob the pair, and I love that they were scared and that they actually showed their somewhat soft side because, yeah, they're powerful, but they can't really stand up against two bikers. I thought that was kind of funny, but in the library, Nate and Sarah discover via Gideon that the two bikers were killed, causing a minor time aberration. So I guess they can take down the bikers. They can take them down like it's nothing. And Sarah recognizes the technique as a League of Assassins move and plots a course to find Malcolm and Dark before they find the Spear of Destiny. And you definitely get that leadership role from Sarah here, which was something that I was definitely happy with. I haven't exactly been happy about Sarah in the leadership role because she's done some things that are very questionable, but here I really did believe her in this role. And Sarah, Nate, Ray, and Maya and Jax, they arrive in 967 where they find a studio backlot for a film called Legends. Yes, the film is called Legends, and here we are introduced to one of the most meta things the show has done, but honestly, I'm so happy they did it. I really think that for a show like this, it made total sense why they did it. And inside, actors are running through a scene, playing the roles of Captain Rip Hunter and Vandal Savage, and the real Rip, now with an American accent, is directing the project. It's basically where we left off in the mid-season finale, and I wasn't too thrilled with the direction they took him. This is probably the best thing they ever did with this character, though, because I'm not going to lie to you guys, while I did somewhat feel bad for Rip, I did find him to get quite annoying at times. I mean, constantly throughout the show, he was brooding, he was complaining, he was doing things for himself. He didn't really seem to care much about his team. He never really seemed much of a leader to me. He wasn't really a good leader, and he just wasn't that interesting of a character. Besides his family being killed, there wasn't really much else to him. Arthur Darville was great, but this is more what this character should be. This is one of the most different roles that we've seen on the show, but it really is all for the better, I have to say. And the problem that Rip is dealing with in this episode is very interesting because Rip, like I said, is a director, and they poke fun at the fact that Vandal Savage is a terrible villain and that he's so one-note and the actor is so wooden. And how many people complained about that last year? I even complained about that. I even complained that the actor who played Savage was wooden and that he wasn't that great. I mean, sure, maybe he was somewhat okay in some of the episodes, there were definitely some episodes he was better than others, but there definitely was way too much of him. And this season, now that they've gotten rid of him, it's proven to be a much better show. And I like the way the show really poked fun at that. Also poking fun at the fact that Hero's just a MacGuffin. Yeah, that's very much what Rip was. And Rip takes his friend George aside to ask for advice on the project, only to be approached by Malcolm and Dark. And of course, we know that they're there because they want to try to recruit him. And the Legends arrive, instructing the villains to get away. And I love Rip and George's reaction. I mean, they are terrified to see them here. Not just Malcolm and Dark. They're terrified to see the Legends. I mean, they don't know what the hell is going on. Rip doesn't recognize the team. They're calling him Rip. We can tell immediately he doesn't know them. And the Legends then fight Malcolm and Dark. It's a pretty sick fight. Some really good action in this episode. And while Jax tries to extract Rip from the scene, to no avail, police arrive at the scene. They arrest Rip while the Legends and villains escape. Rip has one of the most childish screams that I've heard, and it was so funny. Just little things like that made my day. I thought they were just a lot of fun to watch, and that's something that's great about this episode, that this is one of the most fast-moving episodes we've had of the show. And I'm not saying that Legends isn't a fast-moving show, because it certainly is, but this episode in general, it just felt like everything was just, non-stop, and everything was just, the momentum was really building throughout this episode. You could definitely tell that all the characters were really getting into this one, and I definitely did feel that. And they return to the Wave Rider, the scripted Rip's film in hand, and while Jax, Ray, and Sarah question how Rip doesn't remember them, they realize that Rip actually might have the Spear of Destiny, because they don't know where else it could be. He must be the one that has it. And Stein and Mick have some sort of therapy session, which is interrupted by Sarah. And again, I love how any sort of dramatic moments kind of interrupt in this episode because there's not really time for it. And she shares the news about Rip and tells the two of them that they need to help on a mission to get him out of jail. But they don't really, Stein and Mick for the most part aren't really a huge part of this. Like, they're a part of this mission, but they're kind of more sitting back to deal with Mick's other stuff, and I like that overall. But they arrive at the 967 police station with Stein pretending to be Rip's therapist, and I love that Rip was freaking out saying, "You're not a therapist, you're not my therapist." Like, he was doing everything he can to try to prove that he was innocent, and it was pretty funny. They discovered that Rip actually has been going by the name Phil Gasmere, and let me just say that Rip actually doesn't have an accent. He has an American accent here, and that was definitely cool to see, but it really to show Arthur Darville's range. But they're led to Phil in a holding room where he does not recognize the team, and he's screaming for help at the top of his lungs, and Mick then knocks him out. They escape with him from the police station. Again, just a really funny scene overall, and just such great comedic timing. Mick has always been good with really dark, deadpan humor, and this is a very good example of that. So Malcolm and Dark show up at the precinct looking for the Legends, and the Legends find an exit on the roof of the precinct where Rip tries to escape from them, insisting that he is currently hallucinating and that he took too many drugs. I mean, again, that was definitely very funny with him thinking that he tripped up acid, and just then the Wave Rider appears in front of him, causing him to pass out, and basically Malcolm and Dark arrive on the roof, firing their laser guns at the Legends. The team scrambles on the Wave Rider, which flies away. I'm not gonna lie, this was a pretty funny chase scene. I mean, there was some really funny stuff going on here, and with Rip now in the medical bay, Gideon reveals to the team that Rip's brain has been completely reprogrammed as Phil Gasmer, and any sort of memory of Rip he thinks is just a character in his movie. And Ray and Stein suggest that this was done through Rip's physical contact with the time drive as a way of helping him travel out of the Wave Rider, because as we know, Rip left because he felt the team would be better off without him, and he felt that they could function better if he wasn't there. And Ray's provoked by that notion for an unknown reason, and he actually leaves the room. So Gideon also reveals that Rip grabbed the Spear of Destiny before making contact with the time drive, and Mick suggests to Stein that they use Gideon's brain scanner to determine what is wrong with Mick's brain, because they know that definitely something's going on there, and I like that they actually utilize it. Stein also believes that they will not work, instead suggesting that Mick's hallucinations are caused by total normal emotions that he's feeling about Len's demise, and that's all it really is. You know, it's not really anything crazy. This is just him feeling a lot of empathy and feeling like he caused a lot of it, and I like the way they played that back, because up till now, that was the best episode of the show. I mean, Destiny is probably the best episode of the show, and it's still, I mean, this episode definitely rivals it, but that episode was incredible, and Mick refused to believe that, asks Stein to use the brain scanner anyway, and Ray then finds Amaya and Nate, who are looking for descriptions of the Spear of Destiny throughout history. They tell Ray that Sarah has asked him to help reverse the effects from the time drive on Phil's brain, and basically Ray and Nate discover that they have been having lapses in memory since the altercation at Phil's film set, and that's a very good recurring joke throughout this episode. Ray and Nate get increasingly stupider throughout this episode, and again, it sounds like something that wouldn't work, but because of how wacky the show is and how willing it is to embrace its ridiculousness, it works really, really well. And again, the episode doesn't take itself too seriously, and that really does work here. But then we get to the pinnacle ridiculous twist here that actually does benefit this episode and is one of the coolest things this show has ever done. This is honestly such a cool twist. Amaya and Gideon actually discover that Rip's friend George, yes, George, the guy that Rip was talking to, who was on set during that fight, is actually none other than George Lucas. Yes, George Lucas is on this show. I don't know how this worked. Honestly, I have no idea how they made this work, but George Lucas is a character on this show, and that his being at the fight actually led him to becoming a car salesman instead of a director, because he was so paranoid by seeing time travelers there, he doesn't want to be a film director anymore, and this aberration caused him to never make Star Wars or Indiana Jones, and that made Ray and Nate go into their respective careers. So, you know, that's the thing that really made them who they are today, and that connection, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it actually strengthens the episode. And again, as ridiculous ridiculous as George Lucas being a character in the show is, it really does make sense. I mean, Nate has made many references to Star Wars, many references to Indiana Jones. Hell, I think there was one in the beginning of this episode. Honestly, I really, they did a really good job with setting that up, and without these movies in the current timeline, they don't have the skills to help their team. So Sarah determines the team needs to find George Lucas and get him back into filmmaking to fix the aberration. Unfortunately, they're too late because he's actually exiting a film school. He dumps a box of props down a garbage chute and thus sets up the real plot of this episode. So Ray, Nate, and Amaya approach George outside, and Ray and Nate hilariously try to talk to him, talking about how much of a fan they are, without trying to fanboy out, which, honestly, if I saw George Lucas, I probably would have reacted the exact same way. I mean, this is a guy who is going to make some of the greatest films of all time. I mean, say what you want about the Star Wars prequels, yes, he really, I don't know what happened to him there, but I mean, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, hell, American Graffiti, some of the best films of all time, without a doubt. And just seeing their reaction, I mean, that's, I think, how we would react. That's how an audience would react, and I think that's our reaction in general to seeing George Lucas here. And Amaya then pulls George aside, asking him to reconsider his decision to quit film school. And I also love the line where they're talking about how they're from the future, and Amaya nonchalantly mentions how she's from the past. Just little things like that I thought were very funny, but she asked him to reconsider his decision to quit film school and to think about the millions of people his stories will actually inspire in the future. And yeah, I mean, again, it's something that seems like it's not a big deal, but actually, the episode does take itself a bit seriously in that regard, and I thought they did a good job with that. I like the way that, not serious, that's not the word, but there is a moral, definitely. It shows why this is so important. It shows why George Lucas making movies is very important for, that of Ray and Nate. He inspired them. He made them who they are today, and without their inspiration for George Lucas, they don't have that skill set. They're not as into that kind of thing. I mean, how many people watched Star Wars and said, I want to do that? I can't think of a world where we don't have Star Wars. I don't know how the world would be, honestly, but really, I mean, Amaya does have a point where his stories have inspired so many people, and I really did like the way that story propelled this episode. But back on the waiver, Stein takes the brain scanner into Mick's living quarters. The scanner reveals that Mick has a device implanted in his brain that essentially functions as an antenna. And again, this is completely absurd, but it works really well. Stein suggests that Len may have bonded with the time energy after his death, creating a sort of time ghost that Mick is able to see. So because of this thing in his brain, it's kind of conjured up this fake version of Len. So this kind of gives Stein a reason to get to work on him medically, and Mick reveals that the device in his brain was implanted by the Time Masters when they were brainwashing him into becoming Kronos. One of the strongest plots of the show by far last season. I really did love that plot last season, and it really does play well into this season. Now it makes sense why Mick has kind of been on that verge of going crazy, and that makes sense why Len's torturing him, because yeah, this was something the Time Masters are doing to essentially get him to remember that they want to be Kronos, that they want him to be bad. And Mick then begins to have a conversation with Len's time ghost. Mick begs Stein to help get the device out of his head. Stein suggests that he and Gideon will figure out how, and again, I like the direction that went. I thought this was very interesting overall, and again, gives Mick more character development, which is always welcomed on this show, because Mick is one of the best characters on the show by far. This great scene where Sarah tries to convince him of his true identity, but Rip's, he's still not really believing her this is actually who he is, and she shares her story about how Rip recruited her to the Legends, which is a decision that actually gave her life purpose. And yeah, that's very much true. I mean, if she really was not recruited to the Legends, who knows where Sarah would be? She probably would have killed Damien Dark. She probably would be on her own, probably doing things that are very well crossing the line and really not just being in a very good state. I mean, Laurel probably would have still been killed, but things would have been really bad for Sarah, and if she was not recruited, she would not be as level-headed as she was. Even though Sarah hasn't made the best decisions, Rip really did give her purpose. Rip made her realize that she could lead the team, and I really have loved that arc that Sarah's gone through. A lot of people are saying that Sarah's kind of becoming the main character of this show, and that's very much true. I mean, Sarah definitely is being promoted as the main lead. She is the leader of the team, so I definitely think she is the main lead. And they did a really good job with giving her that scene. That really does give Phil a lot of confidence, definitely. So Jax comes in, discovers that Phil's actually put his version of the team inside his screenplay, and Phil reveals the plot of his screenplay revolves around finding pieces of the Spear of Destiny inspired by an old wood piece he had. When Jax and Sarah asked where the piece of the Spear of Destiny is, Phil reveals he actually gave it to his prop master, George, and basically we find out that the Spear of Destiny, yes, the Spear of Destiny that pierced Jesus Christ's soul when he was on the when he was being crucified, was given to George because Phil thought it was just a prop, and because when being a movie director, he thought it was just a random piece of wood. And again, little things like that seem so absurdly ridiculous, but it just goes so well with the overall tone of the episode. It actually blends in with pretty much all the wackiness ensuing. But Ray, Nate, Amaya, and George are back at the film school. George actually decided to stay enrolled in, and they're quickly confronted by Malcolm and Dark, who fight with Ray, Nate, and Amaya in the hallway. Malcolm steals Amaya's totem, and he and Dark demand George find the piece of the Spear of Destiny, and Merlin and Dark then hold the 4 hostages in George's dorm room. Ray and Nathan realize that due to the timeline changing, neither of them have the ability to suit up. Again, another very interesting twist that actually does provide a lot of weight to the overall story. I really did like the way that heightened the tension, and they did take this seriously. I mean, while it was quite silly, they actually did take this specific part seriously, and I actually like they did that. But Ray and Nathan realize, basically, Dark confronts George, and when George reveals that he dumped the Spear of Destiny in the garbage, Dark asks where the nearest city dump is, and in the Wave Rider, Sarah and Jack suit up to find the spear, because they're really the only people who can actually, save them, because they can't, use their powers or anything. So they find Stein getting ready to operate on Mick in the medical bay. They quickly disregard it, and I thought that was pretty funny because really after everything they've been through between meeting George Lucas and having Ray, but he's actually Phil, having Ray and, Nate slowly get stupid, Stein operating on Mick, even though he's not really a doctor, is probably the most normal thing they've seen all day. And the funniest thing about that is that it's just as weird as everything going on, but it is the least weirdest thing about this episode. And that's just very funny to say. When you have so many weird things going on, it just works so well with the overall episode because of little self-aware nods like Sarah and Jax completely disregarding them. It just shows how self-aware this episode really is, and that's really one of the reasons why this episode is so successful, at least to me. So Merlin and Dark then take the group forward to the city dump. The villains push the group inside a dumpster to find the Spear of Destiny, and to make the group move more faster, Merlin activates a trash compactor, closing in the walls of the dumpster, and this is a genuinely intense scene. I like the way this was done. George finds the spear, but the group tells him to hide that from Malcolm and Dark, and George just disagrees, believing that the villains will kill the 4 of them anyway. So Dark gets ready to shoot one of the 4, only for the Wave Rider to swoop in and shoot both him and Malcolm down with lasers. That was pretty dope, and Sarah and Jackson land the Wave Rider and fight with Malcolm and Dark. And Phil's now alone the Wave Rider, insistigating that he's an ordinary guy, and this reminds of the relationship that Gideon and Rip have really had. These two have been, together, well, not together, but, they've been allied for a while, and yes, Gideon is an automated computer voice, but they really do a good job of giving her a character, and she reminds him that Rip Hunter was also ordinary, but that was his courage, not any superpowers, that made him a hero, and that was the thing that made everyone love him so much, or dislike him, because I know a lot of people didn't really like him. Now, Rip talks about, Phil talks about he's a MacGuffin, but he questions what exactly Rip Hunter would do to save the day. And back in the trash compactor, George insists the group give Malcolm and Dark the Spear of Destiny, even if it gets the group killed. Amaya, Ray, and Nate refuse, reminding him that he needs to believe he will go on to make movies to help Ray and Nate become their true selves. Again, that's going to inspire them. And George decides to believe, causing Nate to regain his steel powers and Ray to get the Atom suits. And I love the way all he had to do was say, I want to make movies, and that fixed it. But the team escapes from the trash compactor. They help fight Malcolm and Dark, and Amaya gets her totem back from Malcolm, regaining her powers as well. Malcolm and Dark then start to run away, leaving the amulet behind them. The team grabs it, only for all of them to be knocked down by Thawne, and the Legion of Doom starts to determine which of the legends to kill first. only for Rip to arm this Captain Hunter outfit and his British accent to join the scene. So at this point, I was extremely confused. I'm like, why is Rip suddenly back? And he then aims his gun at Thawne, but it doesn't fire. It's clear that he's only still stuck. He's still stuck as Phil, and he was just pretending to be Captain Hunter, basically just to see if he could actually do something and see if he could actually, know what to do. But again, he doesn't know how to fire a gun. And again, just things like that I found to be very funny. And in a last-ditch effort, Rip asks Gain to fire at the Legion of Doom. The Wave Rider sends a laser beam at the Legion of Doom, knocking them to the ground. The Legends and George Lucas flee into the Wave Rider, but Rip lingers behind, and before the team can get to him, Rip is then taken by Eobard Thawne. The Wave Rider flies away, and Sarah, distraught that Rip has been taken, obviously because they weren't able to completely get through to him, but they did get George to make movies, and now Ray and Nate are back to who they are. So in a sense, they did have some sort of victory, but not really in the way they wanted it. But Sarah then sits in the cargo bay. She's looking at the piece of the Spear of Destiny, and Jax walks in, reassures her that Sarah couldn't have saved Rip before Thawne had gotten him. Sarah understands that, but still feels like she failed her responsibilities as captain because, she was there to be the captain. She didn't really feel like she stepped up that much. And I like that she really has this lack of confidence in herself. Again, because the episode was so fun, these emotional scenes, they work really well because there weren't a ton of them. The episode wasn't overtly emotional, so you generally do feel for Sarah in this scene. And Jax promises that the team will rescue Rip, insisting it's not just a promise, but it is a prophecy. It's something that they will in fact get done, and I like the way that was handled. But Mick then tells Stein that he isn't seeing Snart's time ghost anymore after the removal of the chip from his brain, and Stein reveals that although he did successfully remove the chip, it hasn't been functioning in months. So they question if Mick is really second-guessing the team, as the visions of Len suggest, and I think it's an interesting direction to go in. If that's really what's going on, if he's really feeling regret over what he did. I mean, we know that Mick said that he wants to be a hero, but is he really fitting in there? That really is a big question because, when was the last time that Mick actually did something to help the team move forward? He really hasn't. If he really is questioning the overall direction, that's going to be a very interesting storyline to see where they really go with that. But now that George Lucas's movies are part of the timeline, Nate sets up a movie night for Ray and Amaya in the captain's quarters. They debate which of Lucas's movies to watch first. Nate wants to watch Raiders, but Ray wants to watch Empire Strikes Back. I love that Amaya wanted to watch Howard the Duck, and they freaked out about it again. That is everyone's reaction to a George Lucas movie. But then they decide the mood is too somber after losing Rip again. Gideon suggests that Rip would want the team to enjoy themselves, and the trio settles in for their movie nights. And then we get to the ending where Phil is restrained to a chair in a mysterious room. Thawne confronts him at the Spear of Destiny. Phil insists that he was bluffing back at the junkyard. He doesn't know anything about his true identity or about the spear, and he tells him that he's not going to be the one to rough him up. Malcolm and Dark then approach Rip, preparing to torture him, and that is the way that this crazy episode ends. But let's just get into this episode and talk about what made it so great. Because, wow, I mean, honestly, I have no idea how this went as well as it did. This is an episode that sounds like it's doomed to fail. I mean, again, think about the plot. The plot of this episode is that Rip is alive, but he's not alive as Rip. He is Phil, a B-movie director who is making a movie about the legends. That's meta enough. But if that's not enough, George Lucas is his assistant who isn't a movie director yet and hasn't made Star Wars and all those things. And that causes Nate and Ray to start to lose their stupidity, their intelligence because of, their inspiration for George Lucas and trying to get him back on the right track. It seems like something that was just doomed to fail, but because the episode embraced its weirdness and realized that this isn't something we need to take so seriously, that's why this works so well. I mean, there were so many great lines here, just so many little visual gags. Like, there's this one great gag during the chase scene where you have the scene with George, Amaya, Luke, George, Amaya, Nate and Ray, and then we cut to a scene of Dark, Malcolm, and Thawne just in an elevator, and it's just so mundane, but it's hilarious, honestly. The way that was done, seeing their reactions to them in the elevator was just so funny to watch. Things like that. This is by far the funniest episode Legends that we've ever had. That's something I definitely was very happy about. I really did love the humor in this. I mean, really everything hit very well. It was very meta in a way the show usually isn't, and that's really what contributed to this so well. I love the way that all that was done, and I really love Phil, I have to say. I never was that huge a fan of Rip Hunter. I never hated the guy. I just wasn't really a huge fan. Not many people were, but I really was never a huge fan. I know I said that he was a good character, but I didn't really think that he was ever that great, really. I love Phil, though. Phil, on the other hand, I think that Arthur Darvill absolutely kills it as this character. He really shows his strengths here. His American accent, his physique, his dedication to movies, the way that he is just denying that he's Rip Hunter. I can't wait to see where this character is going to go, and especially the whole thing with him thinking that the Spear of Destiny was just a piece of wood. Again, hilarious. So dumb to think about. Something that sounds so dumb on paper, but it's executed in such a brilliant manner that it actually works so well. That's something I really did love about Phil as a character. I'm interested in seeing really where they're going to go with this, what ends up happening with Thawne, Dark, and Malcolm, if you know he's gonna get away. I'm sure he's gonna get away, but we'll have to see what happens there. That's gonna be interesting. And then Mick, as we know, Mick is really starting to question who he really is, if he really wants to join the team. That's something else I'm very interested in, is where his whole storyline is gonna go. Is he conflicted? What's gonna happen there? Overall, guys, I absolutely love this episode. This is by far one of the best episodes the show has ever done. It was different. It was unique. It was everything the show needs to do. These are the kind of episodes the show really needs to be doing. I want to see them do more stuff like this. I want to see them give more time to just ridiculous content, because things like this, you can just have a lot of fun with. And the show realized it didn't need to be so serious. It can have fun with something, and that's what it did so well here. It just had fun with this concept, and it's one of the most fun hours of the show we've ever had. I'm so happy to see how much the show has evolved and how far it's really come, and I'm definitely going to give Legends of Tomorrow Season 2, Episode 9, Raiders of the Lost Ark, a 4.75 out of 5, or an A. But overall, guys, I'm this episode of Legends Tomorrow. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. Did you like it? Did you think it was too weird for you? Did you like the more wacky tone of this episode? I definitely want to see more episodes like this one and less like the self-serious type episodes. But that was the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for the season of Sweet Vicious, because that show just concluded, and I'm going to do an entire review on the season. I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.